make a move and the bunny gets it.
I said, put the bunny back in the box. Why couldn't you put the bunny back in the box?
Psychically, I'm very well endowed.
It's showtime.
Roar. Roar.
Colonel Ironsides here. 200 years I stood in the gap, fighting those who would harm my country. It was my honor, my sacred duty, so help me God. 9 times they took my life. 9 times I stood back up and made them pay. The freedom fighter and I could handle anything, but someone betrayed me. I was ambushed, made mortal, rendered powerless, and retired. They passed an amendment that made me a civilian before I left the hospital. For 50 years, I watched my country change. Watched its work while erasing me from history. The day I quit my job, I powered up and discovered they lied about that too. I'll remind them of freedom. I'll remind them of duty. I'll remind them of their oaths and who they serve. I'll remind them while I'm shoving it down their throats.
Psychically, I'm very well endowed.
I want to know what you're thinking. There are some things you can't hide. I want to know what you're feeling. Tell me what's on your mind.
Hey there, this is Kid from Telepathic Bunny Comics. Welcome to the Rabbit Hole. This is a special Tuesday show because I was asked to come on and kind of help revive the Cannabis and Conspiracies brand. One of my favorite shows I've ever done with Belmont and AC Pritchard, and Ray Havelock was on there for a little bit. It's funny, I've done a show with Ray Havelock set in Australia, and he's a plant. He comes from elsewhere to Australia, and he doesn't really doesn't know a lot about the area, it seems, but great guy. It was a fun show, a little bit chaotic. It took us a while before we became the well-oiled machine that we were there at the end. We're probably not going to do it very consistently. Maybe once or twice a month, maybe. We'll get back to it eventually. But anyway, I'm just glad, Belmont asked me. Things are healing. From the events of last summer, but summer before last. Sorry, we just passed the summer before last. But anyway, Now, last time we did a Monday call-in show, we did it's had this great panel where we're talking about what makes something Christian. Is it the content itself, or the people who create the content that makes a Christian? And during that, I played a conversation that C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien had that changed C.S. Lewis's mind about everything, pretty much. Changed his life. And it impacted him so much that he actually wrote it down pretty much verbatim, because the man had almost a photographic memory. It was one of the reasons why he was so brilliant. But they basically somebody like dramatized it, and I I found it online, and I played it, but I sped it up so it could fit within the parameters. But this week, I basically slowed it down. I just basically cut it up into 4 pieces to make them bite size, so we could just go through. It's so thick. There's so much there that it's gonna, to really properly give it a going through, it's gonna take basically breaking it down. And so that's what we're going to do today. Hopefully I'll have some chat participation to kind of help me out, give me some feedback, let me know what they think about it. We didn't have any panel people contact me to come on, so it looks like it's just me all by my lonesome, but that's okay. All alone naturally, I can handle it. But anyway, so that's what we're doing today. Anyway, let's get on with the first clip. Now, let me introduce the clips as we go. But the first clip is it's basically J.R.R. Tolkien is making his case for the importance of mythology, and how Christianity and mythology work hand in hand. As a Christian storyteller, or a Christian that is a storyteller, not necessarily making Christian content on the surface, or content with Christianity in it overtly. The fact that I am a Christian, that I create, this conversation is really, really important. And we start out with basically to litigate the case. J.R.R. Tolkien's basically talking about how the removal of supernatural from the conversation of the intellectual conversation, how that's diminished mankind. And so this is the first clip.
Myths are fiction. The stories they tell aren't true. They're lies and therefore worthless, even though breathed through silver. They're just beautiful lies. You can't seriously believe in fairy tales.
Oh, Jack, myths are not lies. In fact, they're the very opposite of a lie. Myths convey the essential truth, the primal reality of life itself.
Go on.
Well, you see, we have been duped into using the word myth as being synonymous with a lie. because we have been duped into accepting the first real lie of materialism. That is the hideous claim that there is no supernatural order to the universe. The materialists have imprisoned us in a world of mere matter, of physical facts, divorced from and devoid of metaphysical truth. Well, I say that they are lying. I say that they are the ones who have come up with a false myth. Their world doesn't exist. It's merely a figment of their imagination. Well, fine. However, there's a problem. The problem is they have convinced us that it is true. They have made us believe that this is all there is. 3 dimensions, 5 senses, 4 walls.
Okay. All right. So that first part. Now, one of the things that has been a struggle for me as a Christian who likes to write fiction, and that was if to consider my, to consider me using my gift for God in His glory. If writing stuff that isn't true, if that in some way, shape, or form was lying or fabrication. And so this first part of the conversation, he's talking about that materialism is the true lie. The fact that if you take out the spiritual dimension, if you take out the metaphysical, the existence of something beyond ourselves, that essentially what you do is you compress humanity to lock themselves inside the 4 walls, as he was saying, and you diminish them. What's up, Wookie? Hey man, good to see you, dude. I'm on a conference call right now, otherwise I'll be on with you. Oh, no problem, man. I know you're having issues right now. Just hang in there. I'll be here. Anyway, so the issue is that I always ran into is when I wrote, the things that I enjoyed writing the most were fictional. Writing fiction, writing, and it wasn't necessarily when I tried to write things with overt Christianity in it. I found that the work didn't flow. That it was like pulling teeth. At one point I even tried to write a church growth book, and I couldn't get by. I couldn't get past the first chapter or 2, even though I had a pretty solid premise. I just couldn't. It just didn't come out that way. And I was like, well, wait a second. If this is part of my calling, then why am I not able to, express the calling in this way? Hold on a second. If you take out the metaphysical, you'll be living the life the way it was intended. Oh, okay. I'd say you're a skeptic. No big deal. Welcome. But okay. So evidently we have a C.S. Lewis among us. No problem. Let me replay the second part. I think this will answer, your statement there.
Isn't it?
Most emphatically not. Jack, the 4 walls of materialism are the 4 walls of a prison, and the materialists are our jailers. Don't you see? They've put us in a prison of 4 walls. They don't want us to see what's beyond those walls. They don't want us to discover what lies outside their narrow philosophy. Worse than that, they think that any attempt to escape from the prison is an act of treason.
Well, wouldn't it be an act of treason against rationality to believe otherwise?
Now, Jack, think for a moment.
Think for a moment.
How can it be wrong for a prisoner to think of things that exist other than walls or jailers? Doesn't the fact that the prisoner is able to think of things outside the walls suggest that perhaps things do exist outside the walls? After all, if the prison really is all there is, how are we able to picture things that exist beyond the prison? Well, this is where myths come in, you see. Myths exist outside the prison. Myths allow us to escape from the prison. Or if we are not able to escape, at the very least, they allow us to catch a fleeting but oh so powerful glimpse of the beauty that lies beyond the walls.
But what is it that we're meant to be glimpsing?
Well, don't you see? The truth, Jack. Myths show us a fleeting glimpse of truth itself.
Truth. Truth. What on earth is this truth that you're talking about?
Quid est veritas? What is truth?
I'm glad to see that you've entered into the spirit of the myth, Jack. You've just cast yourself into the role of Pilate. Pilate? Oh, I see. You're able to believe in the lesser myths because you've already accepted the big one. Once you accept the big myth, the lie of Christ, it's easy to accept the smaller ones. Right, fellas, I'll play the role of Pilate. I wash my hands of the whole nonsense.
Okay, so there you go. Let me see. How are we doing over here? Check the comments real quick. Okay. Actually, I'm a believer. I'll never deny. Do we have autonomy from the gods? Yes. Otherwise, this wouldn't be an issue. Can God change this? Yes. Therefore, this is how it was intended. Okay. Gotcha. Sorry, I misunderstood. Well, talking about the prison, of rationality, talking about, I see people like Sam Harris who are, basically, this is all there is, there's nothing else that could possibly be possible. And you see how absolutely shut down and miserable that guy is in a lot of ways. And the Bible says that we're to enter into the kingdom of God as the mind of a child, or with the openness of a child. I was watching that Jordan Peterson was talking about Tammy Peterson, his wife. She went through a cancer diagnosis. She was supposed to only have like 10 months to live, and he watched her like. Somebody gave her a rosary, taught her how to pray it, and she began praying the rosary. And as she did so, it kind of opened her up, kind of like she began to view the world as a bigger place than just the test that they were giving her, or the diagnosis that they gave her, or the things that they're doing to her body to try to help her survive, to live longer. And he said he knew they grew up together. He knew her when she was a child. And he said that as she delved more and more into her faith, he saw this childlikeness that he had seen leave her as she became an adult kind of return. And he said that was one of the biggest miracles, the ultimate miracle being that she told him that she was going to be healed by the time their anniversary came around. And around the time of the anniversary, the doctors declared her cancer-free. And so he said, but the way she said it to him was such a surety. She had gone beyond the prison walls. She had viewed the possibilities out there, and she was okay with dying, but she was also believing that there was entirely possible that she wasn't going to. And that really gave her a whole entire different scope to her life. You can watch. There's many interviews with her and many interviews with him talking about the situation. I didn't even know it happened. So when I caught that last night, I was like, wow, that's incredible. And he says that here's one of the towering intellects of our age. Anybody that's ever heard the man would say so. And he says that he is in awe of her. And just the faith that she's able, that she reacquired. And but yeah, so here we are with C.S. Lewis. He's at the point where, his part of rationality, the way that he had dismissed the whole spiritual realm, he'd already, because of his materialism, he had dismissed anything metaphysical outside of himself. And so here he is. We've left it. When we left him, he was at the part where he's like, I'm done. I'm going to declare myself Pilate and wash my hands of the whole thing. He's like, I'm not going to justify the discussion of this. It's just, this is so far outside the realm of any possibility I'm willing to acknowledge. And here's the thing that always bothered C.S. Lewis about J.R.R. Tolkien was the man being so devout really messed with him, because he always assumed that Christianity came with a kind of a form of naivete, that you had to like ignore reality to be a Christian. And here was a man steeped in reality, with an intellect that allowed him to come up with 4 different languages to write his book, and the cultures that accompany him. Somebody that brilliant, like could write volume of lore that's over 500 pages. I mean, somebody that's that inventive and that brilliant, and yet he believed in the metaphysical. And so that niggled C.S. Lewis, and that's why they're having this conversation. So here we are. We left Mr. Lewis having this declared that he's washed his hands of the whole thing. So here we go.
Well, Jack, you may be able to wash your hands, but your mind is still muddied. You're not thinking clearly at all, old chap. You're acting as if myths are mere arbitrary inventions of fiction, as if we pull them out of thin air. But what you don't understand is that we make things by the law in which we are made. We create because we are created. Creativity, imagination, is God's imageness in us. We tell stories because God is a storyteller. In fact, he is the storyteller. We tell our stories with words. He tells his story with history. The facts of history are his words, and providence is his storyline.
Are you suggesting that all of history, that everything around us is all part of some divine myth?
We are all part of his story. This very conversation is part of his story.
But perhaps it isn't his story. Perhaps it's only your story. How can you know that your story, the story that you believe, the Christian story, is any more real than the other story?
But don't you see, it isn't my story. It's his story. You're acting as if Christianity is one myth among many. It's not. It's the true myth. Christianity really happened. Jesus really existed. So did Pilate. And yet it is this true story that makes sense of all the other stories. It is the archetype. It is the story in which all the other stories have their source, and the story to which all the other stories point. It has everything. It has catastrophe and its opposite,
what we might call eucatastrophe. It has the joy of the happy ending, the sudden joyous turn in the story that is essential to all myths. It has to a sublime degree this joy of deliverance, this evangelium, this fleeting glimpse of the real joy, to which all other joys are but a distant echo.
To which all other joys are a distant echo. I think I might cut that off a little bit. But basically, you know, the idea that that storytelling is ephemeral in some way, shape, or form is somehow not Christian or somehow anti, spiritual. And when we separated fiction and culture and making art from Christianity, and when we separated those things, and we had this movement towards more rationality, and then suddenly the artistic became considered more like left leaning, and Christianity, was mired in conservatism. And what that did, by separating the arts off from quote conservatism, but more right leaning things, which these whole entire political discussions are essentially divisive at the very core of them. And it's one of Satan's great lies, is that I heard somebody I respect, Bob Odenkirk, say on a podcast that he didn't think you could be conservative and be artistic. He didn't think it was possible, and that by somehow by being conservative, you've eliminated the possibility of being creative or participating in creative arts. And unless you draw images of Jesus that somehow, shape, or form, unless you narrow down your focus into things that are basically Bible stories, or have something to do with doctrine, that somehow shape or form you're not being, that you're not expressing creativity as a Christian. And this is J.R.R. Tolkien we're talking about, devout man. And if you go and you read, and yes, there are some stand-ins, there are some there's doctrinal basis through a lot of Lord of the Rings. If you remove that, you really destroy Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power. But Aragorn's whole entire arc, he goes from Strider to Aragorn to the King, the Return of the King. But through that process, you see him embracing his savior, his role as savior. But then towards the end, he humbles himself, to basically try to distract Sauron long enough for Frodo and Sam make it to Mount Doom, and and risk it all in that belief, showing faith. But when you start talking about how the divine myth, the Christ narrative, how that's basically most stories that are successful have a lot to do with these themes that are in that myth, or not the myth, but in that story. Got a comment. Hold on. Bring it up. Where we at? It was the chapels of Europe, painted ceilings painted by an atheist or a believer, right? Right. And they can't replace them. They can't figure out how they did these things. If you've ever seen pictures of the chapels and like Notre Dame before they burned it down, they can't rebuild Notre Dame. They don't have the capability of rebuilding Notre Dame. And they have more technology, but they can't. The only way they could rebuild Notre Dame is if they did it brick by brick the way it was before. They can't like make a new Notre Dame, and they don't understand why that is. And what they don't understand is the focus of the craftsmen that made the Notre Dame to start with was to honor God. The spiritual aspect of it. And see, if you look at what Jesus said, the two main commandments are love God and love your neighbor as yourself. And there you are, the cross, right? You got the upper focus and the focus of your fellow man. And all the best art starts with the God focus, and also it focuses on lifting up your fellow man. So all story that has that in it winds up being God honoring. And indeed, if this last part is going to talk about that. So let me go ahead and play it.
Tell us, what did you mean by catastrophe and eucatastrophe?
Well, for example, it has the catastrophe of the fall and the eucatastrophe of the redemption. It has the catastrophe of the crucifixion and the eucatastrophe of the resurrection. It has everything man's heart desires, because it is being told by the one who is the fulfillment of desire itself. It is a story that begins and ends in joy.
But just because a story brings joy, it doesn't necessarily follow that it's true. There are many joyful myths. They all seem rather flimsy to me and ring rather false.
And yet this story has the inner consistency of reality. There is no tale ever told that men would rather find was true, and none which so many skeptical men have accepted as true on its own merits.
Perhaps it's just a very well-written artifice.
This story has the supremely convincing tone of primary art, not fiction, but of creation. And to reject this leads either to darkness or to wrath. And in my own life, it has led me from darkness to light.
Astonishing. You absolutely astonish me.
Now, if you look at the whole conversation, the way J.R.R. Tolkien does, he starts out with basically talking about the problem of the materialist, that what you see, what you can feel is all there is. Then he moves through the importance of being able to see beyond what you can physically touch or see, as being like, being shut into a prison is living without imagination is like being shut into a prison. And the fact that you can see beyond that, the fact that imagination allows you to reach beyond that, seems to indicate that there is something else out there. And then that second part where he's talking about how, there's this whole big myth that's going on, this myth, this story that's been told, and how we're all a part of it. And that, that narrative that of Jesus Christ. You can see it all woven through the Bible. Thousands of prophecies that got fulfilled in one man. And, there's an actual Jesus. That's historical fact. And there was an actual Pilate. There was an actual, the events of his life and death are historical fact, been well established. And so, when you read the Bible and you see what else is there, what that he was the Son of God, that he lived his life, basically taught all this doctrine that has basically created the Western world. And then then he was, killed by the powers that be. And then beyond that, his followers believe he resurrected and rose again, and that there's a happy ending. I think it's why we're addicted to happy endings. I think that's one of the reasons why the nihilists these days love killing the myth of a happy ending. They're like, oh, there are no happy endings, right? And so the whole entire Bible, Revelations is kind of a happy ending for some. Others, it's a terrifying thought. And so he's talking to the whole concept of catastrophe, eucatastrophe, found in the story of Jesus. Catastrophe being events happening to the negative, eucatastrophe being events happening to the positive. And the fact that both of these things are found in the story of Christ, the whole arrest and crucifixion was catastrophic. But the 3 days later, there was the eucatastrophe. It was eucatastrophic, and suddenly there's this whole movement that was birthed from a person who's supposedly murdered or, is executed by the state, that where people had such a belief system that they were willing to die for it and never advocated. And so it's like, that very fact. And all throughout history, storytelling, and some of the best stories, some of the best tales, some of the fiction that we have built our culture on had at its basis some form of doctrine, some shadow of that story of Christ, and so by the very act of telling story, but the very fact of creating tales, the very fact of creating narratives is actually an act of worship. It's actually expressing the part of us that is most connected to God. Man, I honestly believe this. Got another comment over here. Grab it right quick. I've met Jesus in my dreams many times. He is real, and so are the other 6 angels. They are real too, Krishna, etc. Okay, a little more pantheistic than I am, but basically, the thing about it is separating out pop culture from belief, from that part of yourself, the exploration of the supernatural, exploration of the ties that bind us all together. When that got separated out from our fiction, it basically took us down a road that led to where we are now. you know, where you watch a movie and there's nothing to it. There's no heart to it. There's no permanence there. There doesn't seem to be anything worth, you know, it doesn't seem to be anything worth recalling about it later. I remember when movies used to, like, you could like discuss them with people. You would like discuss scenes, discuss characters, discuss you know, plot elements, discuss character motivations, discuss you know, what would have happened off the screen, you know, and the greater world that was like expressed. You know, I was a big fan fiction writer, and what you did in fan fiction was you basically you went and lived in these worlds that were created by somebody else, and then you tried to tell a story that was set in that world. And if you did it right, it was almost like you breathed life into back into that property. You know, I wrote MASH, I wrote Harry Potter fan fiction. You know, I wrote multiple different other stories, you know, and I enjoyed doing it, but ultimately I wanted to tell my own stories. See what we got over here comment wise. In Revelation, they talk about meeting the 7 angels, not just one. Yeah, I know the scriptures you're referring to. Modern Western civilization is built and based on Christianity. It's been under attack from evil people bent on destruction of what is, so as to control what is left. Yeah, and the way forward is to reattach creativity, to basically stop thinking of creativity, creative arts, of artistic endeavor as being a right or left thing, politicizing it. You know, I the other day in Madison Square Garden, there was an artist that basically said that he had been kicked out of the artistic community because he had conservative leanings. And what a sad thing to do, to say because of your belief system, you're not allowed to be an artist, you know, because you have a certain ideological bent that it somehow invalidates any output that you have. Some of the greatest output that we've had in all of pop culture history have come from people with a more conservative bent. You know, a lot of things that are being that are still being emulated today. You know, like Lord of the Rings. How many Lord of the Rings clones do we have? You know, that whole entire genre of fantasy came from people wanting to basically tell their own stories with the in the Lord of the Rings universe. Dungeons and Dragons came from somebody wanting to create a way for people to tell their own adventures using the Lord of the Rings as a backdrop, you know. And there are people that can actually speak these languages that J.R.R. Tolkien came up with. You know, there's people that are fluent in Elvish. You know, I've heard them speak. Narnia, right? That's C.S. Lewis came up with that. Narnia has a lot of elements of Lord of the Rings in it. I guess it's because there's a lot of cross-pollination in between him and J.R.R. Tolkien and the Inklings, their little group that they had at Cambridge, which produced some other art, you know. But ultimately, one of the things that is going to be important going forward is for us to stop politicizing creativity, stop politicizing creation. And the way we can do that is by getting into space as conservatives, as people who have more conservative leanings, are more faith-based, and making better art than and earning our place and through meritocracy. And if somebody basically says that your art is invalidated because of your political leanings, then create art that's so incredible that they have to appreciate it. They have to acknowledge it. And that's what's happened over the centuries. Okay. Quo Vadis was written by a Christian, directed by a Christian. And one of the greatest epics ever, which probably will never be recreated. It was on such a massive scale, was the Ten Commandments. Elia Kazan, a Jewish man, and it basically, if you look at the accomplishments that they came up with, the things that they came up with to create these incredible set pieces and things like that, it's amazing. The man took years off of his life to and devoted it to this project, and you watch it today, and it holds up. Anyway, okay. I have found that in my writings, if I have thought and I don't write it down immediately and never seem to write it down again the same way, it's divine inspiration. I'll agree with that. Great movie, The Ten Commandments. Now, one thing about creativity that I tell people this all the time, and I believe it. Even though I first heard this concept from Stephen King. Consider that source. You can get something good from anybody. But he was talking about the pre-existing artifact. That story is something that's existing somewhere, and that you're pulling it out of the ether. And I have found that I've pulled stories out that were almost fully formed. And then there's elements in it that I didn't quite understand. And then later on, going back and doing rewrites and things like that, I've discovered that these things that I just pulled out are actually based on factual evidence that I was unaware of. That's happened to me many, many times. And the only way I can justify that is if I'm tapping into something eternal. I'm tapping into something omniscient, that there's a story that I'm telling or that's coming to me that is needs to be in the universe and needs to be in the world. And J.R.R. Tolkien said that God is telling a story, and we're part of it. I.e., any output that we have is bound to have a divine source. If everything comes from God and to God must flow, which is biblical concept, then, i.e., anything that you create and you create from a part of that Christian worldview. Maybe you're not consider yourself Christian, but if you believe in the morality, if you believe in those Christian concepts that have established the Western world, then when you produce something out of that, then it's not going to return void. It's going to be used in some way, shape, or form. You know, I've been often inspired by, you know, things that you would consider just throwaway fiction. One example, there was a man named Karl Barks. Look this up. And he dwelled in obscurity, creating the Duck comic books for Walt Disney. And just because of his health, I think it was asthma, he had to basically mail it in from out in the desert. I think it was Arizona. But he's away from Disney, so anything that Disney gets on his behalf would have to be forwarded to him, right? And so anytime Disney got like fan mail for this guy, they basically warehoused it because they wanted people to think Walt Disney himself drew these comics. But this man, he spent all these decades with a National Geographic magazine in one hand, his imagination just running wild, his little boy imagination. And he crafted these stories, this world, these vistas. You know, he because he didn't have any feedback, he just let himself just explore and go anywhere he wanted to go. And he was first and foremost a storyteller, but his art became very inspirational to people. And what he didn't know was that so many artists out there, some of the biggest names in the whole entire, you know, comic industry, storytelling industry, you know, even movie creators like George Lucas, were all inspired by these Duck comic books, you know. And this man thought that he was creating something to throw away. He thought that he was just he was doing it for his own enjoyment and for a paycheck. And he didn't think anybody was like, you know, that anybody was collecting these things. He thought that they'd throw them in the trash. But he did it because of the love. He did it because he was inspired to do it. And he was getting fulfillment from it, even though because he had a horrible married life, you know, his finances were never all that solid. And basically just dwelled in his own world. And then somebody from the mail office, maybe somebody was new, somebody didn't know that they weren't supposed to forward anything, but they forwarded a fan letter to Karl. And this fan letter was somebody wanting an interview. And Karl was confused, you know, why would anybody want to interview with me? You know, and so out of his curiosity, he calls this guy. And he's like, you know, I'm the guy that, you know, I'm the artist on the Duck books. And the guy's like, do you have any idea how important your work is? No idea. There's even a direct line between Duck magazines and the guy who's considered the father of anime. So not only did Karl Barks like inspired Star Wars, inspired all this pop culture, just this one guy in Arizona somewhere creating for his own enjoyment, but pulling stuff out of the ether, you know, and just being inspired and just being pure creativity. And because of that, we have so much of he just basically so enriched the rest of the world, and he had no idea. And once he found this out, he he later became a millionaire. Later on in his life, after living in poverty all these years, because people wanted his art, and so they were willing to commission it. But he is those magazines and the things that he came up with by himself somewhere in the backside of the desert changed the world, and still changing the world. It's still inspiring people, still inspiring other people to create. And this is supposed to be pop art. It's supposed to be throwaway. It's supposed to be ephemeral. Nothing is ephemeral. Nothing is unimportant. When you create something and put it in the world, you are adding to the fabric, adding to the story. And so if you think that writing stories is like a secondary thing or not that important in the long I mean creative people get told all the time, well, you're not going to make any money at it, or it's not important, there's other things that you should be doing. I have a friend of mine who basically got an ultimatum to give up creating because it's not bringing in the money. And I don't. It's still to be, still yet to be determined if he's going to give in to that. But the person that's putting that pressure on him, they don't understand what they're doing. What they're doing is they're putting him in prison. They're putting him in the jail. And if you really love somebody, you would never want to see them confined. You'd never want to see them diminished in any way, shape, or form. And I really pray that they'll work it out, because he's got a lot more stories to tell. But at the end of the reason I wanted to go over this conversation is, hopefully somebody out there today will listen to J.R.R. Tolkien, the creator of Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and The Silmarillion, a whole entire genre of fiction, talking to C.S. Lewis, the greatest Christian apologist of the modern era, who wrote the Narnia Chronicles of Narnia, also wrote Screwtape Letters, Mere Christianity, The Great Divorce, so many books that are enriched the world. And it all started with this conversation. It all started when he started believing that maybe there's a divine myth that he's a part of. You, my friend, are part of the story. And anything that you tell is going to be part of the story. So don't let anybody stop your storytelling. Don't let anybody tell you that creation is not important. That even if there's not a financial, even if there's not a dollar sign attached to it today, Karl Barks dwelt in obscurity and in poverty for the most part. But he created. And it changed the world, whether he was aware of it or not. That there's still some good left in this world. Tolkien, yep. The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, yep. They were still talking about that. I'm still waiting for my adaptation of The Silver Chair. That is my favorite. The British did an adaptation of Chronicles of Narnia, and they did a version of The Silver Chair with Tom Baker's Puddleglum. So even if it never gets a big screen adaptation, I'm good. I still have that. But anyway, so I wanted to go over this today. It's very important to me. Creation's very important to me, and it should be important to you. And don't let anybody tell you to give it up. If you have it in you to create, you have a responsibility to create. Make sure you fulfill your responsibility. And even if you don't ever see the result of it, it's never going to come back void. Somebody somewhere is going to see it, be inspired by it, and maybe make something else. So keep creating, folks. It's part of the divine myth. It's your responsibility. Thank you, Frost. That high praise coming from you. You got something good going on there, man. Anyway, that's been Cool for Telepathic Bunny Comics, and I'll see you next time. Y'all have a nice day and follow the white rabbit. Bye, everybody.